Welcome to the Kelly Cardenas podcast, where attitude is everything. On today's show, this man blew me away. The introduction that he got, we got a chance to meet in Sundance, Utah. We were at a convention, the Money Multiplier Experience. And one of my friends had heard him speak and had him in, and he talked him up. And most of the time when you hear someone talked up, then sometimes they can't live up to what they were talked up to be. But this was exceedingly abundantly more than ever anything that I could experience. And the sad thing was that I had to speak after this guy. And this man, honestly, no matter where you're at in your life, no matter what you're going through, the type of motivation, not only motivation, but inspiration that he's going to give you to work towards your goals and to take every single excuse out of your life. I tell you, this man is incredible. He's an author, an award-winning author. He's probably one of the best speakers I've ever seen in my entire life. He's also a Guinness Book of World Record holder 2 times. He is a Paralympic silver medalist. And this man, honestly, I couldn't write all the things on the ticker as you see it going across. I had to write the encyclopedia because this man is so great. He told me, though, what I love about it is his humble spirit. He said all you had to do was write Jeff Griffin. But this man, honestly, will not only affect your life, but impact your life at a completely different level, and you'll never be the same once you get to spend time with him. So welcome to the show, Mr. Jeff Griffin.
Oh man, thank you so much, Kelly. That was exactly how I wrote it. You just read that perfect. Totally joking, man. That was way too much. That was way more than I deserve. But that's what I love about you. And if I can tell your listeners, your listeners love you because of who you are, and you speak from the heart, and you have that childlike personality and attitude. And I loved it when I showed up in Sundance. Here I meet this man who has blonde dreadlocks, and he's coming up to me, and I come from a very bubble place growing up in the Happy Valley. And I'm like, oh no, this guy's going to come shoot me. He comes up, introduces himself. He's like, hey, listen, I'm Kelly. Let's be friends. And I'm like, I love this guy. I'm like, I am your friend. Absolutely. So thank you for letting me be here.
Well, the first thing when we met in Sundance, I walked in, and then you rolled in. And when you rolled in, a lot of times, I learned this early on, and maybe I'm wrong on this. Help me with this, and help the audience with this too. When you rolled in, I instantly wanted to understand and know, and I wanted to talk about it as opposed to act like it wasn't there. Because a lot of times, I mean, is this true where, say you roll in, Jeff is in a wheelchair, and a lot of times people act like I can't see it, or they look the other way, and I always want to address it right away. How does that make you feel, and what is it? I mean, is that something that you would encourage other people to do?
Oh, absolutely. For me, and here's the situation I find. Every single one of us are different. You go ask 10 other guys in wheelchairs or ladies, and they might give you 10 different opinions. But for me, I love how kids say what adults think. And so for me, I was like, man, why can't we be more like like these kids? Because as I mentioned at Sundance, I had this one kid coming towards me with his mom, and they're outside. In his outside voice, he points to me, looks up to his mom, and says, "Mama, why is that guy in a wheelchair?" And the parental correction was priceless. The mom's like, "Shut up, Tommy, stop being rude." And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, absolutely, the guy has a question. And as you mentioned, Kelly, I go around the world, and I speak on stages all over the world. And when I come out on stage, I address the elephant in the room. And that's how good looking I am. And completely joking about that one. But as you mentioned, you said I'm in a wheelchair. So I come rolling out on stage, and people can see my disability. People can see what's up with me. And they're like, well, shoot, man, I know people don't come out in wheelchairs. How did this guy end up in a wheelchair? And so, I love the inquisitive. I love people asking, because assuming, you know what assuming does, right? For both of us. And I just love the fact of people just getting out there and saying, hey, listen, what's up? What's going on? Why are you in a wheelchair? And if they're belligerent and rude about it, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you why I'm in a wheelchair if you tell me why you look the way you do.
Well, I think it was cool too because you hear a lot of people talk about mindset or they talk about getting through things, and there's times where you know that the person read it in a book, right? So they read it in a book and then they regurgitated it to you, saying that you should think this way and you should react this way. But your story is so unique because you performed at a high level. You had these aspirations, and then there was the painting time when you went painting. Can you talk to us a little bit about this?
Oh, absolutely. So Kelly, when I was a young kid, my dream was to play football in college, and it was just a song that sang to my soul. I loved it. I dreamt about playing it on the big stage, and I would carry a football with me to the mall. I would play it in the springtime. I'd play it in the summer. I'd even play it in the wintertime. And we'd play it on the streets, and would be playing tackle football on the streets in our moon boots. And I loved it so much. And when I couldn't play it on Sundays, because my mom's like, you can't go outside and play on Sunday. You got to keep the Sabbath. I'm like, okay. So I went downstairs in my basement and I played it in my mind. That's how much I loved it. I'd throw the football as close to the ceiling as I possibly could without hitting it, dreaming about the time I was going to, make catch after catch after catch from the next All-American quarterback from BYU, a school down south where, where I grew up. They bred him to hate him down there. I'm like, yeah, you did not talk about the school down south, but that was my dream. And one thing I learned and discovered that there's three D's that are at the foundation of every solution. We tend to talk about our problems, right? I always let people know my problem of being so good looking. It's so overwhelming. It's so tough. I'm like, it's a problem, man. Not at all, but we all have problems. You have problems. I have problems. Your listeners have problems, and some are big, some are small. And one thing I've learned that everybody's problem hurts, and all pain hurts. And so I'm not diminishing anybody's problem here, but the problem isn't the problem because we all have them. The problem is the lack of vision. The problem is we don't understand these three Ds, and the problem is we try to do it on our we try to solve things on our own, and so I believe that if people can understand these three Ds, it will help them climb their own mountains that they have to climb. It will help them accomplish their dreams and desires. And that's what it starts with. It's a dream. The first thing is, if you don't know what you want, then none of this matters. None of this matters whatsoever. And so I was fortunate enough to have a song that sang to my soul. And your listeners, I know for a fact their dream may not be to play football, but I do know that they have a dream and they have a song that sings to their soul. And anybody who is listening to this right now, I invite you to stop what you're doing and listen. Not to me, not to Kelly, but to you and that song that once sang to your soul. Because when was the last time you allowed yourself to dream? When was the last time you allowed yourself to dream in color, to dream in HD? When was the last time you allowed yourself to weave that tapestry of dreams that's going to hang on somebody else's social media wall? And so for me, I had a dream to play football. And when I told somebody to play I was going to go play football. I'm like, you can't do it. They gave me all the reasons why I couldn't. They're like, Griff, you're too short, you're too slow, you're too white. And I'm like, okay, absolutely, all three, you got them right. Too short, too slow, too white. And fortunately for me, I didn't understand that we as individuals, as human beings, we've been conditioned and programmed to base other people's possibilities on our limitations. Or in other words, we base other people's possibilities on our limitations. And so we reject what we don't understand, and we base our possibilities on what we know. And so if we ever want to do something we've never done before, we're going to have to step out into that void, that darkness. And we're going to have to take those steps and do things that we've never done before. And so, that's what I did, Kelly. I just continued to listen to my dream and went after it. And I was fortunate enough to be recruited by the legendary Hall of Fame coach, Lavelle Edwards. And I got to experience two plays. I got to taste the sweetness of success. And I played 2 downs in college. But in between seasons, I don't care what they tell you. They don't pay enough money to play football. But in between seasons, I came home and I was like, what can I do to make some quick money? Start my own business. And I started my own business as a painter, and um, business was booming. And my last job, it wasn't my last job, but my last job, I found myself on my back next to an unpainted barn in Napoleon Dynamite country in Preston, Idaho, where I had just fallen 40 feet, and my life and my dreams had just fallen with me. And I found myself on my back looking up at the sky thinking, okay, now what? What next? My dreams had been shattered. I'd fallen 40 feet. My dreams of playing football were over. My dreams of riding a motorcycle. I wanted to buy a motorcycle because every time I saw a guy on a motorcycle, there was a lady on back. And in my immature mind, I'm like, hey, you know what? I think in small print it says girls included, because I thought that the chicks dug the wheels, and that was validated after the fact that I was put in a wheelchair and I went to a dance on campus, and I was freaked out. I'm like, no one will want to dance with a guy in a wheelchair. I didn't realize that the best way to dance with a guy in a wheelchair is on your lap. So the whole night I had, lap dance after lap dance after lap dance. But I learned that the chicks dig the wheels. And so again, going back to this idea of, what, you've got to have a dream. That's the first D that you have to understand. You got to have a dream. And I also learned too that for me personally, as I fell 40 feet, I learned that cutting corners leads nowhere but down. So we can't cut corners. And we've got to do it right. If we don't have time to do it right the first time, when are we going to find the time to do it right?
So Jeff, who motivates the motivator? Because I think this is a huge question for me, because everywhere you go, like you roll in, your smile lights up the room. You light up the room the whole entire time. When I said that I wanted to be your friend, I wanted to be your friend because this light that was around you, and that light was your attitude. But talk to us about this, because I think that it's puzzling to me a lot of times when you're out there, and say in Sundance, we had, 40, 50 people in the room, and you lit them all up. You lit every single person on fire. But who lights you on fire to be able to keep that burning so you can go out and pour into other people?
That's a great question. That's a great question, because another question that's always asked as well is, hey, Griff, are you always this positive? Are you always this optimistic? And the answer is no, I wasn't. I was an angry young man. And after my accident, I entered what I call the syrupy, sticky sauna of self-pity. And I was wallowing in that. And I'm like, I was just shaking my fist at God. Why me? Why now? I was in the best shape of my life. And now my whole identity that I had wrapped my life up into was taken away. It was taken away. And so the question that you ask is, who do I turn to receive light, to receive inspiration? And it's honestly, and I'm not saying this just because you have me on it, but it's people like you, Kelly, that just give me so much hope, so much inspiration. And it's just the everyday people. I look at myself, Kelly, as an under ordinary guy who does the ordinary just a little extra.
Mm.
And the answer to your question, who gives me the light? It is the light giver. I am a God-fearing man, and Jesus Christ is my light. And that's who gives me the hope, the inspiration. And he's the one who helped me exit that sauna of self-pity. He helped me get up. He helped me get going, and he helps me keep going. And so for me, the source is the source giver himself.
So when we list off everything, right? So keynote speaker all over the world. If you're a company out there and you haven't had Jeff, you haven't had the right convention yet. To have this guy, seriously, to have him, it will transform not only your company, your organization, but also the individuals within, which will light your company on fire. But when I say that, like a world-renowned keynote speaker, author, Guinness Book of World Record holder, 2-time, the Paralympic silver medalist, all these things, people look at your life, and even though, we got some challenges, a lot of times they say, that must be easy for you, Jeff, because you got all this stuff. Talk to us about the last time that maybe you argued with God, or you were mad at him recently, because I know it's not just like God takes you out of the sticky syrup of the sauna, right? And then everything's cool. When's the last time that you went into that dark place, and how were you able to deal with it at that time?
Yeah, great question. And honestly, there's been some low points in my life since that accident, but nothing ever like that moment. It was a dark, dark place. I was upset. I was angry. I was confused. I was upset with myself because I cut some corners. I always say that when the moment to perform has arrived, the moment for preparation has passed. And you don't always prepare for these horrible things, but we can prepare for some things. We can start to do things now while times are good. I'd like to say that I love the law of the harvest, because what we reap is what we sow. And I always say that, the law of the harvest is where, fruit is true to its nature. Fruit is true to its nature. An apple is always going to be an apple. And when you apply pressure to a fruit, what comes out? Juice. Juice comes out when you apply pressure. And so if you apply pressure to an apple, apple juice comes out. If you apply pressure to a pineapple, pineapple juice comes out. If you apply pressure to a pear, pear juice comes out. But what's interesting is so many people don't understand this concept, the law of the harvest, because when and human beings are the only creation that I know of that's not true to its nature, because we do not live up to our potential. We do not live up to our greatness. We do not live up to what we have inside us. And because we don't understand these laws of life, these laws of the universe. And if we apply pressure to a human, people are like, what comes out? Like juice, human juice. I'm like, yeah, that's nasty. But it's the same concept. When we apply pressure to human beings, what doesn't come out isn't human greatness. What comes out to a human is what we've put in. And if you don't like what's coming out, especially these last 18 months, these last 2 years, because there's been a lot of pressure that's been applied, you know what? Change what you put in. Change what you put in. And so that's what's really, really important to kind of set this up of, okay, what was that moment like when it was dark? And then, those conversations with God. And I want to share with you a question that was asked to me by a prisoner at the hospital that set me free from my prison. So this prisoner was lifting weights in prison, had an aneurysm in his brain, paralyzed the right side, and he had a slurred speech. Well, I was having a pity party. The hospital no longer fed me in bed. I'm like, if I wanted to eat, I had to get out. And so I had a body brace. It took me about 20 minutes to put the body brace on, to roll over, and then to get on there, and then put it on and Velcro it. And it took me a half an hour to get out of bed into my wheelchair with the aid of a nurse or two. And so here I am in my wheelchair. It's an ordeal just to get out of bed. It's an ordeal to use the restroom. It's an ordeal to go eat. It's an ordeal to put on my pants. I had to put on nylons. They called them tights to help with the circulation, but I called them pantyhose. And I knew that I started to change when I got upset when I put a run in my hose. I'm like, ah! And I'm like, I'm turning into somebody I'm not. And here I am rolling down the sterile halls of this hospital. The halls are white. The floor is white. Everything's sterilized. And I'm like, there's no color. There's no hope. There's no future. And I'm just crying as I'm rolling towards the cafeteria. I get to the cafeteria. I grab my tray. I get some food. I don't even care what kind of food I have. And those times where you're having such a good pity party, you don't want anybody to be a part of it. A lot of times we're inviting people in, but I'm like, no, I don't want anybody to be a part of this party. And here I am getting my food, and I go away as far as I possibly can from anybody, because I don't want to be around anybody. And I go find the corner of the cafeteria. No one's there. I put my tray down on the table. I'm flavoring my food with my tears, and I just want to be alone. And all of a sudden, like, as I'm flavoring my food and having like the peak, part of my pity party, this tray plops in front of me, and I look up, and I'm about to tell this person to go somewhere where I'm not gonna say. But have you noticed this phenomenon with girls? They glance at each other. There's a 2-second glance, but there's a 20-minute conversation. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that just happened. I'm like, I don't know what happened, but I know that there's a 20-minute conversation that took place. I would like to be a part of it. Well, me and this gentleman had a kind of a little moment like that where he looked at me and I looked at him, and I was about to tell him where to go. And we had this little thing here. And before I could say anything, he asked the question that changed my life. And the question that he asked was this: "Why are you crying, dude?" I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Why are you crying, dude?" And in his slurred speech, I recognized the question that changed my life forever. And the question that changed my life was, "Why are you crying, dude?" And for whatever reason, Kelly, that question just snapped me out of my pity party. And I looked around and I'm like, holy crap, why am I crying? There's a guy just down the table from me who broke his neck. He has a halo screwed to his skull. He has his arms immobilized. He can't even move them. He can't even feed himself. And so he has to have somebody feed him his food just to survive life, just to sustain life. And here I am, I'm able to, get my stuff and eat, and I can hug and I can feel. And this guy can't even do that. And there's a guy right next to him who's paralyzed from the neck down, but he has some mobility in his arm. He's able to lift it, but he can't close and clamp on the fork. So they tape the fork to his finger. And so here he is trying to feed himself. And by the time he gets the fork to his face, the food has fallen. And I'm looking around and I'm like, holy crap. Why am I crying? Why are you crying, dude? And at that moment, Kelly, I started to look at things that I could do instead of what I couldn't do. And as soon as you flip the switch and you reframe your reality, it changes everything. Why are you crying, dude? Yeah, man, I was awesome at it. I was amazing at it. I had that pity party, and it was like the morning of the dawn breaking forth, where the light just barely comes over the horizon from a dark, dismal, depressing night. And that ray of sunshine just entered into my heart, entered into my soul, and just went out and just emanated and just filled my whole soul. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to change things. And at that moment, I'm like, I'm never going back to that syrupy, sticky sauna of self-pity again. And you ask my wife, and she's like, he's never been. In fact, she keeps telling me, like, Griff, bring it down a little bit.
So I think it brings me to, as I'm listening to your story, it brings me to two things that have been so important, right? Which is innovation and the ability to adapt immediately. And you've had the ability to be able to innovate in your life. Like when you had challenges, when you fell off 40 feet and you get paralyzed from your waist down. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was the doctors gave me a life sentence of living life from a chair, like 0% chance of ever walking, standing, moving your legs. They gave me 0% chance of having kids, which is the first function to go, last to come back. Some of the experts gave me a 0% chance of getting married, not because of my wheelchair, but just because of who I am. And we're celebrating 25 years in July, and we have 4 beautiful biological kids. And you're absolutely right, Kelly.
So that innovation, man, I mean, it took you to play basketball in a wheelchair. And this was something that I've been trying to press him on, and hopefully all of you out there listening are going to actually hear him for the first time and that he's going to admit it. But he talked about his basketball, and he had accolades and things like that. But the thing that I'm going to ask you, you had a free throw contest. I want you to talk about the free throw contest. Then we're going to talk about some numbers here, because I didn't get the numbers out of you when I was there in Sundance. I kept pressing him. I kept asking him. He was like, no, he was just being coy. But this man won a free throw shooting contest a couple of times, and then he never told us how many there was inside of it. But fill us in on the free throw aspect of it, and was that a part of the world record?
You know what? Absolutely. And going back to the first D that I mentioned earlier on
Yeah.
here, the first D is dream. You got to have a dream. I don't know about you, but as a little kid, I wasn't a book guy. I didn't read books. As I mentioned before, I got a D minus in sixth grade, and never touched a book. But there was one book that just fascinated me, and it was called the Guinness Book of World Records. And I'd open that book up, and I'm like, man, these guys all have records, but they were some crazy records. And I'm like, and in the back of my mind, I told myself that would be so cool if I was in this book. But I didn't want to like collect belly button lint or grow out my fingernails 3 feet long or do all these other crazy things that people do to get in this book. And I'm like, but that'd be cool to be in this book. Fast forward 2008. This is, I was hurt in 1995. So this is 13 years later. I'm playing a little bit wheelchair basketball. Each NBA team has a wheelchair affiliate team. And the All-Star event happens Valentine's weekend. And so for 8 years, I've been invited to the All-Star event. And so we kick it off on Thursday, and then they get rid of us on Friday and they bring in the big boys. I like to think the big boys have already showed up and kicked off the events. And and so there's 12 from the East that's invited, 12 from the West. It's 2008. It was in New Orleans. And there were still the effects from 2006 Katrina, the hurricane. People were still living underneath overpasses, and Bourbon Street was kind of crazy to go down. I was venturing down there. I'm like, I got like 4 pushes in, and I turned around. I'm like, no, not tonight. So here I am in New Orleans. We're celebrating the All-Star event, and we're getting ready for the All-Star game. And the Guinness World Record representatives were there. Like, we're going to do an event. We're going to, at halftime, we're going to do an event. The number of free throws in a minute from a wheelchair. We're going to pick 3 from the East, 3 from the West. One of my teammates who was with me in Athens, Greece, Trooper Johnson, was there as well. And they asked him and myself at the same time if we wanted to be one of the, 2 of the 3 representatives from the West. And we both said yes. And as soon as he left, we both turned to each other and we both said simultaneously, I'm going to win this record. And I like to believe that, I played 20 minutes of the first half. Trooper played like 5 minutes of the first half. So he had fresh arms. The 3 representatives from the East were 2 of my teammates as well at the Athens games. And the first guy that shows up, here we are at halftime. We just got done playing a half. There's the mascots, there's the cheerleaders, there are official representatives, there's people on the in the stands, the lights are on us. And so going back to this, the thing that I mentioned before as well, when the moment to perform has arrived, the moment for preparation has passed. So I had a moment, back in 1995 where I did not prepare for that moment. And I was scrambling, problem solving, and I hit the ground and break my back. Well, fast forward 13 years, here I am, 2008. I've created what I call a holy habit and righteous routine. Those are so essential. Those are so important. It's part of the 252 lifestyle that helps you succeed. And so my teammate Opie goes first. He's the number 2 free throw shooter in the world. If I take the stats from Athens, Greece, there's only 12 teams in the world that are invited to the games. And Opie was the number 2 free throw shooter in the world. He had the second best percentage. He gets up there, he's first. The representative, has a stopwatch, and he says, "Go." Opie starts shooting, starts firing. Clank, 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 splash, splash, clank, clank, splash, clank, clank, splash. Time's up. The official count was 6 made shots from a wheelchair in a minute. And I turned to Trooper. I'm like, dude, either this is tough or Opie sucks. And we know that Opie doesn't suck. He's like the number 2 free throw shooter in the world. And so the 4th best free throw shooter in the world gets up next, and that's Jeff Glassbrenner. He's the other guy from the East. In fact, Jeff Glassbrenner is the first male American amputee to summit Mount Everest. In fact, he was the one who helped Dwayne Rock Johnson with his role in Skyscraper. I don't know if you've seen the movie or not, but Jeff Glassbrenner is now currently summiting the 7 highest peaks on each. The the highest peaks on each continent, and then walking to the North Pole and South Pole. And amazing guy. He's the 4th best free throw shooter in the world. And he gets up there. The official, has his stopwatch, and he says, "Go!" Boom. He starts firing away. Splash, splash, splash. Clank, 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 clank. 60 seconds later, he ends up with 9. And I'm like, holy crap. Either those guys suck or this is difficult. Another guy goes as well. So now it's my turn. And the reason why I give you some context here is, here it is, my opportunity. I'm like, I'm going to win this Guinness World Record. So I go up to the line, and I have a little routine. So I go through my routine, and I don't let the moment overwhelm me. So I go through my routine, my holy habit and righteous routine that I've created myself. And by the way, I am the 5th best free throw shooter in the world. And so I go through my routine, and I'm like, all right, well, here's my shot. And so they have the Guinness World Record people there, the representatives, the same mascots, the same cheerleaders, the same lights, the same people in the stand. Ready, set, go. I take the ball, boom, splash, 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 splash. After a few of these makes, I'm like, this is easy. Clank, 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 clank. I'm like, oh no. I'm like, I got to humble myself. I'm sorry. Splash, 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 splash. After 60 seconds, boom, the official time, the official count, as I'm rolling over to my teammates, they yell out to me, 26. And I'm like, really? Over the loudspeaker, the official count, 25. I'm like, holy cow, I just blew these guys out of the water. But there's one more person that has to go, and it's my teammate, Trooper Johnson. He wanted to go last to find out what he had to beat. And, in good sportsmanship, like, competition here, as I rolled past Trooper, I'm like, Trooper, your shoes are untied. But it doesn't matter because Trooper's feet don't even hit the ground. And it doesn't matter. We're in wheelchairs, but I wanted to get in his head anyway. So he gets up there, official time goes, and he starts firing away, and he's making it. And I get up to 15, and I'm like, dude, records beat. It's over. Stop counting. At the end of the 60 seconds, he stops his stopwatch. We're waiting for the official count. And over the loudspeaker, the number comes out, 25. So we both turn to each other. We're like, shoot off. And Guinness is like, nope, you both get the record. And so they took a picture of Trooper and I in this book of Guinness World Records with where he and I are there. So I took the picture, cut him off, and photoshopped him out. And I'm like, I've got the record right here, brother. Even though he and I, we both turned to each other like, we're going to win this record. And so the record still stands today. He and I are both co-world record holders, but I like to say that it's mine. But, going back to is this little kid where I'm like, I would love to be in there. And then I had my opportunity to be in there. And when the moment to perform has arrived, the moment for preparation has passed. And I didn't think that I would ever have an opportunity for this, but my opportunity came. And I love the quote from Sir Winston Churchill that says, to every man, there comes that special moment, unique to him and fitted to his talents, where he is figuratively tapped on the shoulder and offered a special thing. What a tragedy if that moment finds him unprepared or unqualified for the work which would be his finest hour. Now, I'm not saying the Guinness Book of World Record is my finest hour. I'm not saying 2008 is my finest hour. And I'm not telling you guys who are listening right now that X, Y, and Z is your finest hour. But what I am saying is there is going to be an opportunity, a moment when you are figuratively tapped on your shoulder, not Kelly's, not mine, not anyone else's, not the people you're looking on your social media wall, but your shoulder, when you are tapped and offered a special thing unique to your talents and fitted to you specifically. And what a tragedy if that moment finds you unprepared or unqualified for the work which would be your finest hour. When the moment to perform has arrived, the moment for preparation has passed. And so what are you doing right now to fill your mind full of that greatness that you really are? When's the last time that you texted somebody and said how great they were? You know what? When's the last time you texted yourself and told you how great you are? In fact, right now, I want you to stop what you're doing, stop listening to this, and I want you to text a message to you and tell you how great you are. And it's okay to do that. Be honest. Be humble, be sincere, but give yourself the love that you absolutely need on a daily basis. And so I love that opportunity. I love that experience because there's so much that it taught me about being prepared and creating this holy habit and righteous routine and living the 252 lifestyle. And so I just, that's just a little experience in my life, and it was a fun one.
Well, Jeff, I mean, obviously, like every single person that's listening now is clamoring for the book. You need to check it out. It's called I Am Possible. You need to be able to check them out. It's on griffinmotivation.com. But the question I have for you is, you went through this life altering, challenge and tragedy, right? So you're 18, 19 years old, you fall 40 feet, you're paralyzed from the waist down. You had dreams of playing college football. You want to play basketball. You do want to do all these things. You go through, now there's this motivation, this fire burning. But talk to the people out there that don't have the tragedy, that haven't had the switch that's happened, that haven't had, a bus hit them and then they switch their lives. How can a regular person that's out there, how can they create that fire? What would be some actionable items when, because a lot of times people are like, well, there hasn't been this huge rock, that's blasted me in my life. So how can I get up when maybe I don't have that as the motivator?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question because as I come out on stage and address the elephants in the room, besides how good looking I am, I'm physically paralyzed, but I believe most of us, if not all of us, are paralyzed from the demons of doubt, fear, and complacency. And I don't care um, what's happened to you. Like I said, the problem isn't the problem. And just yesterday, I was talking to a man. He's like, Griff, you're a unicorn. You have what Oprah has. You have what Chad Hymas has. You have that um, that it factor. You have that tragedy that no one else has, and we all experience tragedy, but you have that big one, and that's why you're such a successful speaker. I'm like, okay, I'll take that. Absolutely, I'll take that. But here's what's interesting. You don't need a tragedy to climb out of the ashes
Mm.
and become a phoenix. You don't have to have that tragedy. And uh, here's the problem. Going back to what I said before, our dreams aren't big enough. We don't believe in ourselves. We don't have that vision that inspires us. Instead of being pushed by others, if we have a dream, it's going to pull us towards it. And so instead of grinding and doing all these other things and working a 90-hour work week and doing all these things that these experts out there are telling you, spend a few minutes, sharpen your axe, figure it out, spend some time and figure out what your dream is that excites you, that motivates you, that gets you going. Dr. Oz says, give your heart a reason to beat. And so, yeah, I've had that tragedy. There's a lot of people who had the same tragedy and that has buried them. I talked to one of my teammates. He's like, we need to go visit some of the people in the hospital. He's like, don't invite me. He's like, because I'll just tell them to pull the plug and take their life. I'm like, holy crap. So this idea of having a dream, so powerful and so exciting, that get you going, that get you moving. So it's a matter of flipping the switch and reframing things. There's people out there that are like, well, I don't have a tragedy. I don't have a challenge. I'm like, well, you will if you haven't. I'm like, good on you. Yeah, good luck to you. You will have one. And so, but how do we do that? Because how do we prepare when the moment to perform has arrived? The moment for preparation has passed. So how do we prepare? Because that preparation is important. And I call it the P squared mindset. It's the possibility principle. You can start feeding your mind. You can start filling up your mind with all this good stuff. So when that challenge does come, when that setback does happen, you're ready for the next comeback. And so it's like, what can we do? Well, this possibility principle There's 5 things that come with it. But before I share with you the possibility principle, I want to share with you the 3 lies we tell ourselves that go along with, okay, well, I got to have a tragedy, or I got to have a challenge, or I got to have this in order to succeed. And I got to go to Ivy League school to succeed, or I got to be born on the other side of the tracks to succeed. I got to have a different, identify with a different gender, or I've got to, be a different color. All these excuses that are out there. The problem isn't the problem, because we all have problems. There's 3 lies that we tell ourselves, Kelly. Lie number 1, I'm not good enough. Kelly may be good enough. Oprah may be good enough. Michael Jordan may be good enough. Simon Sinek may be good. Well, whoever it is that you look at may be good enough, but I'm not good enough. Lie number 1, bunch of crap. We all have the ability to achieve our dreams and desires. We come from infinite intelligence. And so we need to follow that faith and create a concentrated, resilient routine to get us through those dark moments that are going to come. There's going to be pushback. There is going to be pushback. There's going to be opposition to your optimism. I don't know if you've ever experienced that before. There is opposition to your optimism. And then as soon as there's opposition that comes, you're like, oh, okay, I guess not. So again, that goes back to the 3 Ds. You got to have a clear, concise dream, and you've got to have a true, definite desire, a burning desire. A desire that's going to match up with your dreams, because once that happens, the floodgates of imagination just open up, and you're able to experience the unimaginable possibilities to create. Kelly, we were created to create. We were created by the Creator to be creators. Just to create these dreams, create these amazing things. And so lie number 1, I'm not good enough. Bunch of crap. You are good enough. You are the solution to impossible. You do have the ability. You do have those dreams inside you. You do have the answers inside you. You just got to go inside. And you got to believe that you're capable. Now, some people are like, that's a bunch of crap. Not everyone can be the president of the United States. Not everyone wants to be the president of the United States. I'm like, my dream's not your dream. So guess what? That doesn't matter. There's some people who are like the most amazing chip vendors. I'm like, I want my Doritos. I want my Fritos. I want my chips. Absolutely. Give me my chips. And you know what? Be the best that you possibly can be, whatever you want to do. And there's some people that can make some good bucks, 6 figures crocheting, teaching people how to crochet. And I'm like, listen, just find what just makes you happy. You have the ability. Not everyone has to be doctors, lawyers, and firefighters and astronauts. But those are cool things. Don't get me wrong. But lie number 1, I'm not good enough. Lie number 2, I don't have the tools and skills. If every single one of us has this device called a smartphone, which is making us dumber. But this smartphone is amazing, right? I have an iPhone 11, and the iPhone came out in 2007. 2017, 10 years later, they were going iPhone 1, 2, 3. I'm sure there's some listeners right now who upgraded their iPhone and got a new iPhone every year. And I always ask, how many guys had the iPhone 9? And some people raise their hand, and I'm like, you're a bunch of crap, because they skipped it. They went from 8 to 10 because it was the 10-year anniversary of them coming up with the iPhone. And just imagine what we've developed those last 10 years, from 2007, 2017. One picture has more memory than the supercomputer that NASA developed back in the 60s. We have more access to information than the President of the United States did back in 1992. So it's not a matter of resources, it's a matter of resourcefulness. And so we have the tools, we have the skills. Stop telling yourself that you don't have the tools and skills. That's just an excuse. And those excuses are keeping us from obtaining our dreams. And then lie number 3 is, I can do it on my own. I can do it by myself. I know it goes back to lie number one that I was talking about, that you do have the solution, that you do have the ability, that you just have to go inside. But guess what? If you have never done something before, go find a mentor, go find somebody who's done it, go find somebody who will believe in you. Because what's interesting, you have this dream, you have this idea, and you come share it with somebody who has no clue on what you're talking about. And because they don't understand what you're talking about, like, dude, that's a dumb idea. That's a dumb idea, bro. And then 3 years later, your idea is like just plastered everywhere. And like, that was my idea. And we made the mistake by going to an idiot that told us that our dreams was an idiot, that was idiotic. And, but find somebody. Now, I'm telling you right now, I would love to hang out with you, Kelly, on a consistent basis, because you make me shine, you make me smile, you make me happy. And it's like, I need to be with that guy on a more consistent basis, because I feel better. I believe in myself, and I feel like I can go conquer the world when I'm done, talking and visiting with you. That's just your gift. Your gift is just to make others feel like $1,000,000. And thank you for doing that. And so lie number 3, you can do a lot on your own. You probably have, but you can't do as much as you possibly can unless you do it with a team. I don't care who that team is, but for me, when I was in Athens, Greece, I learned that team really does mean together, everyone achieves more. So if you guys can come together and you have the same dream and the same idea and the same direction, and you couple it together with like-minded people, you just exponentially increase those opportunities to do that. And you 10 times your results, 100 times the results, 1,000 times the results. It's just amazing what can happen when you come together with like-minded people. It's just amazing. And so those are the 3 lies that we tell ourselves. And so those 3 lies keep us from the P squared mindset. And the P squared mindset allows us to match our dreams with our desires, and open up those floodgates of imagination to create just these unimaginable possibilities. And so anyway, that's just the one thing. There's 5 things that come with the possibility principle. But it's important to understand that you can develop that attitude. You can develop that desire. If you're like, well, I'm not an optimistic person, like, you know what? Flip the switch and tell yourself, okay, I'm an optimistic person. Now, I always say that you can turn your crap into a crop. It's just a matter of how you look at it. One person's crap is another. One person's trash is another person's treasure. And so again, it's just how you look at it. People are throwing away all sorts of great ideas, great things that are making other people very, very wealthy and very, very content. And so if you're saying, well, I'm not an optimistic person, well, tell yourself you're an optimistic person. If you're telling yourself, well, I don't like people, well, tell yourself that you like people. And eventually you'll start liking people. And so again, what is it that you want? The problem is most of us know what we don't want, and we focus on what we don't want, and where our focus goes, our energy flows. And so stop thinking about what you don't want. I don't want to be lonely. I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be ornery. I don't want to be, out of shape. Well, guess what? You keep on thinking about that, you're going to keep on being there, and it's going to happen. And people are like, whoa, what happened here, man? This guy used to be a nice, kind, friendly person. And he's like, he's just turned into Dr. Jekyll. But I'm like, no, so many people plant potatoes expecting pineapple, going back to my law of the harvest. And apparently it takes about 3 years to plant a pineapple and have it grow to fruition. And so, the Chinese proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time to plant a tree is today. And so if you don't like what's coming out, change what you're doing today.
Well, what I love about it, Jeff, is that when I hear you speak, and I've got to experience you, most of the people out there that are listening right now, some of you, it's the first time that you've heard of him. Sometimes some of you, very few of you, most of the people in the world know who this man is because he's one of the best speakers in the world. But I've got the experience of seeing you off stage, and I've got to sit next to you and have a conversation. And what I want to tell every single one of the listeners, the things that he's talking about is the things that he's living. I've got to. He rolled out. I walked out to the parking lot, and we went to get in our cars. This same guy is the exact same, getting into his car, telling me goodbye, telling me I'll see you soon and let's visit and have dinner when we are in Utah together. That's the same guy that was on stage, and he was talking about this. So this is not an act. This is not something that he talks about because it's the right thing to say. He talks about it only because he does it, and that's what the world needs more of, Jeff. You know, I started the podcast because of people like you, iconic people like you in the world, that I wanted to show my kids, Maddox and McKenna, that anything was possible in life with the right attitude and the right work ethic. And when I started the podcast, I wanted them to realize that anything in life was possible. And it wasn't about your attitude, or it wasn't about your aptitude, which my dad taught me. It was about your attitude that you took into that situation. So what advice would you have for Maddox and McKenna? Maddox is 10 years old. He's a little superhero. And then McKenna is 13 years old, and she has the biggest heart in the entire world. Funny as can be, great personality, and loves everything and makes everything grow. What advice would you have for Maddox and McKenna? And if you could use both of their names, it would be awesome.
Oh, absolutely. Maddox and McKenna. I love that. Two M's. I would be so confused. I'd be calling McKenna Maddox and Maddox McKenna, and they'd be so confused by this time. Like, who are you talking to? Fortunately, I don't have the crazy eyes to where, I'd be looking at McKenna and talking to Maddox. And so, but here's what I do. And this is going to be a blatant plug for my book, right? Because you said I'm the greatest speaker in the world. And I like to say that I'm the greatest speaker in the world that no one has ever heard of yet. And I really do believe what I have is helpful. It may not be for everybody, because there's some people who don't want to help themselves. There's some people who don't want to get out of that syrupy, sticky son of self-pity that I mentioned before. There's some people who don't want to get out of their chair. There's some people that want to just listen to the experts and say, hey, you have a 0% chance of doing this because of X, Y, and Z. People have been telling me that my dream right now, Kelly, is to run and not be weary, and walk and not faint, and to have a full recovery in a reasonable amount of time. It's been 27 years. It still takes me. I still get around in my wheelchair, but my dream hasn't changed. I still want to walk and not faint. I still want to run and not be weary, and I still want to have a full recovery. But I also realize that that is going to come, but I can't sit back and not live life until that happens. I've got a great Everest dream out there, absolutely. But as I mentioned before, focus on what you can do, not on what you can't do. And after going to the Olympics in 2004, being an all-star recipient, winning a national championship in the wheelchair MBA, being the youngest trust manager at the bank, getting married when I was given a 0% chance, having kids, what your listeners can't see or don't know, but I can stand up now. I can stand up and I can take those steps across the stage, and I call it walking with swagger. So I had an opportunity to look through my broken back and shattered dreams, sift through, and I found some flecks of gold that helped me get to the point where I was in 2005. And so often we skip the flecks of gold searching for gold nuggets. But if you eventually collect enough flecks of gold, you're going to end up with a bag full of gold. 10 pounds of flecks of gold is as valuable as 10 pounds of gold nuggets. So don't skip the flecks of gold. Receive them when they come to you. And I had an opportunity to sift through my broken back and shattered dreams and discover some of these flecks of gold that I've put together in a 10-step program that I believe world record leaders follow and finish with exactness, and it's duplicatable. And I've, over these last 27 years, I've experimented upon them, and I've formed them into some. I've defined them, I've refined them, and I've put them in a program that other people can follow as well. And then I started to practice them and experiment upon some of the harshest critics called teenagers, and the exponential growth. Once after about 5 years, I'm like, I got it. I've broken the sequence. I know what's going on here. I've unlocked I've unlocked the secret here, and then exponentially it's just hockey puck straight up. And the success these, some of the harshest critics called teenagers were experiencing was predictable. And I got to the point where I had a 98% success rate. And so then that's when I ventured out and started to share these things on stage in corporate rooms and other places as well. And so advice that I would give to McKenna and holy cow, your boy's name slipped my mind. What is it?
Maddox.
Maddox, absolutely. Sorry, man. Sorry, bro. Like I said, I get it all wrong. But the advice that I'd give to him is I'd pick up that book that I gave your dad and read it. You guys who are listening, you can grab the book as well. It's called I'm Possible, Desire, Dream, Do. You can get it on Amazon if you want to, or you can go to my website at griffinmotivation.com and you can get it. You can get my other book too that's called Endless Possibilities, a 90-day recipe for world record results. If you get both those books, you buy 2 books, shipping is free. But here's something even cooler. If you guys put in the coupon code LOVE, LOVE, I will knock off 50% what you buy. And I would recommend that Maddox and McKenna go get that book, read it, and take a look at the mile markers that I've described. And there's just a few of the steps that out of the 10 steps that I have available. I've got a workshop that includes the deeper dive into the 3Ds. And then I have an online course that deals with the workshop if you don't want me to come out in person. But I would begin right now, and I would encourage your listeners to read a book. Whether you listen to that book or whether you read that book, read a book and look for the flecks of gold that come. And there's some books they're like, this was useless. Put them on the shelf. Don't do them again. But there are certain books that you need to reread and revisit. And so I would say, look for those flecks of gold, collect them, and do them, and then help others discover the flecks of gold is going to help them get out of their wheelchair, to help them overcome their paralysis, their mental paralysis of doubt, fear, and complacency. And how cool would that be? Is if we're just, if we're lifting each other up instead of just whacking each other down like a little whack-a-mole. Like it comes up, you go back down, go back down. No, absolutely. Like World War Z, we're like trying to tear people down instead of lifting each other up. I'm like, look for opportunities to help, to serve. And I thank you for this opportunity, Kelly, because I've learned that every great man and woman of history is a man of service. And so thank you so much for your service. I appreciate it. Your kids don't understand how of an amazing man that they have next to them. And I know our kids keep us humble. They're like, Dad, yeah, you're not that. No, not at all. But there'll come a time where they're like, holy crap, Dad, what you know and what you taught me was absolutely true.
Well, I want to thank you, Jeff, because every single person. We're actually going to have a link in the bio of the podcast where you'll have that. You'll have the link, you'll have the code. I encourage every single one of you to get the book, to listen to the book also, but also to be able to get in touch with Jeff. Because having Jeff and being in his presence, honestly, it will take away every excuse in your life that you ever have. I mean, honestly, like I told him, I said, I feel worse about myself after meeting you because there's nothing that I can get up and be like, well, I'm having a bad day, because Jeff had a really, really bad day, falling 40 feet, getting paralyzed. And then guess what? Not giving up on the dream. And that day he walked across the stage. He got up out of the wheelchair and walked across the stage. This is a man that not only has a message, but also he lives that message, which I think is so amazing, man. And like I said, I think the world needs more of you. The world needs to hear of you. If you haven't heard of Jeff, like I said, you're under a rock, because he's one of the best speakers in the world. And again, I want to thank you. Now's the time where you click all the links, check all the sponsors, do what you know you need to do. I just want to tell you, Jeff, how much I appreciate you and how awesome you are. I want to have you back on the show more and more because I think you're such an inspiration, man.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love it. We've just scratched the surface, my friend. There's so much more out there, but again, you want to keep it simple. You want to keep it simple. And if people can understand those 3Ds, if people can grasp the possibility principle and start working on that P squared mindset, they are absolutely going to be able to climb their mountains.
Absolutely, man. Well, you're officially off the hot seat.